Welcome to PodNumbra. The conversation starts now. Good afternoon and welcome to PodNumbra. I'm very excited to have a special guest with me today, Manny Garcia. Manny is joining us from Orlando, Florida, and he is an author, a writer, and a podcaster in the field of spirituality and essentially just general issues surrounding life. Manny, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Will.
Manny, wanted to have you on today because I think you're a super interesting and fascinating person. We've had offline conversations in the past, but just before we get into all the things that make you special in what you do, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Orlando, Florida.
Wow. And would that make you an Orlando native?
It would, and for someone my age, that's a little uncommon.
No, I can't imagine. I live in Tampa now, and Tampa natives are rare too. And I'm not one.
Mhm.
I did grow up in Florida, and Florida natives are a rare breed as well. But an Orlando native, that is a type of person that should be captured and studied because there's only a few of you left.
Right.
Well, that's great. Tell me a little bit about what was it like growing up in Orlando?
It was wonderful. I mean, as a kid, having Disney World so close, Epcot Center had just opened when I was a kid, and of course, I loved the weather. Back then, it was a little more rural, so there were woods to run around in, and the afternoon thunderstorms. Back then, it used to freeze a couple times a year, actually, but it was just I loved everything about it. I had a great group of friends, and I love the beach and the lakes, and it's just a wonderful place to grow up.
And you were using the phrase back then. What is back then? What years are we talking about? You're growing
Well,
up.
I'm pretty solidly a child of the '80s, so born in '72, and yeah, so that was kind of my era through high school, and graduated in '90 from high school, so that's kind of the time period.
Fantastic. Where'd you go to college?
I went to college in upstate New York at Cornell, and so I spent 4 very frigid years up there, which was kind of special, being in the snow for 4 years as a Floridian. It was novel, and I did enjoy it.
Yeah, I had a similar experience after college. I moved to Chicago and lived up there for 5 years, and it's a different existence coming from Florida and then having to deal with the real winter and not getting away with just putting on a light jacket to go outside. There's consequences to dressing inappropriately up north. And then after college, what did you do?
Well, I grew up in a restaurant family, so I thought I was really going to go right into the restaurant business. So I did study hospitality management in college, but for whatever reason, around my junior year, I just had a little bit of an idealistic spurt, and I had always admired the career of law enforcement, and so I started working my way to getting my resume to a point where a police department would perhaps find me appealing. And my first job out of college was actually with the Orlando Police Department.
Wow. So going from Cornell, Ivy League school, back to Orlando to serve on the police force, what exactly did you do other than graduate college to prepare your resume to, catch the eye of the police department brass?
Well, my family, my friends were a little surprised and alarmed that I was kind of taking this pivot. So I wanted to make sure for myself, as best I could, that I was making a decision that made sense. So I signed up for several internships with police departments. The local police department up in Ithaca, New York. I did that, in my off hours when I wasn't, studying. I had so many informational interviews and ride-alongs, and just did as much research as I could. But coming with a 4-year degree back then was certainly a little more novel than it is today, I think. But yeah, I was able to just make my case that even though I have a little bit of an unconventional background, that they should give me a shot. So they did, and I'm glad that they did.
That's awesome. And did you go to the police academy in Orlando? Is that something you had to attend? And I've only seen the movies, so I don't know exactly if it lines up exactly to what Captain Mahoney was doing. But
Right. Yeah, yeah, we had our days that mimicked that a little bit, which were fun, but, yeah, it was in Orlando, 5:30 AM every morning, being out there, getting yelled at by the drill sergeant, and, I loved it. It was a lot of fun, and I made some really wonderful friends there.
all right. And then after the police academy, you served on the force?
I did, yes. Fortunate for me, I was placed in the busiest shift. I had a midnight shift, so I went to work at 9 and got off at 5 a.m. And I was in a district that was the busiest, or certainly had the most crime. So I got a lot of experience very quickly, which was good for me because in your early 20s, you're still trying to figure yourself out. And I was able to figure out over the course of just a few months that this really wasn't my calling, but I was really happy that I gave it a shot, and again, I gained a lot of really, just lifelong experience from it that I treasure to this day.
So after a year on the midnight shift, I'll call it, for lack of a better word, how long did it take you to basically reset your biological clock to get back to regular hours?
Well, thankfully, police academy was a big chunk of that time, so I was only doing midnights for a few months, but it is surprising. It is definitely a shift, probably more than most people suspect who've never worked midnights in any job before. You really you're a different animal, you know, your social schedule's different, your sleep schedule's different, your eating schedule's different, and so yeah, it took a little while to reset.
All right, and then after you left the police force, what'd you do next?
Well, then I went to work for my family's restaurant company as an auditor. I was doing that part-time and went right back into school, to become middle school science teacher. You know, law enforcement is certainly something I'd respected my entire life, and, to that point, and certainly to this point as well, but, I'd always had a fascination with science, and so, I went right back to school to become certified as a science teacher.
That's great. I actually, before going to law school, I got a master's in education from a university up in Chicago because I was planning on becoming a teacher. My mother was a lifetime teacher at all levels. My brother was in the education business, and I somewhat had a small calling to be a teacher, although a brief calling. And then I ended up going to law school and actually never actually taught. But you actually
Mhm.
went into the middle school educational system and bit the bullet and taught middle school kids?
I did, actually, at my alma mater, which was a fun experience being in the teacher's lounge with my former teachers, so that was a good fun.
I just had a son graduate from 8th grade. They call it graduation now. They didn't call it graduation back then. Like, what are you graduating from? But middle school is historically no joke as far as, being a teacher. And obviously, the kids are in a difficult transitional time period in their lives, and you have to kind of, shepherd them through that process as best you can. So tell me a little bit about how you dealt with, some situations in the middle school classroom.
It was a lot of fun, Will. It was certainly challenging at times, but, you know, I taught 7th grade earth science, and 7th grade, at least back then, you had a pretty even split. Half the kids had kind of gone through puberty or were going through it, and half the kids were resembled or had the disposition more of elementary schools kids. So you're really teaching 2 completely different sets of mindsets, if you will. So that was a lot of fun. Coming from my experience in police academy and maybe what might be kind of a natural disposition for me, I really kind of wanted to start strong. So I kind of tightened the screws very tight initially and kept the kids under my thumb, but as best I could. But I quickly realized that, you know, choosing battles in a middle school classroom is a very important skill to learn. And so the kids were able to teach me that pretty quickly, and I was able to loosen up a bit. I think it worked out. We all had fun, and I hope the kids learned something too.
All right. And how long did you teach for?
I taught for a year.
Okay. And then what'd you do
Yeah.
after teaching?
So after teaching, I went back into the hospitality industry and worked for back again to my family's restaurant company. And my niche, you know, it was a family company. So we each, my cousins, my sister, of course, my dad, and my mom, even, you know, everybody had their role. And my role was one of almost like the company cop in a way. You know, I went into a risk management role. So anything having to do with government compliance or food safety or worker safety or risk management in general, insurance, you know, those types of things all fell under my purview. And I just really enjoyed it. You know, it's again, you know, in your early 20s, sometimes, at least my experience, I'd had to kind of bounce around a little bit to kind of figure out who I was and where I fit in. And I guess you could say maybe still on that path for sure.
Right. I mean, life is kind of funny in that way that, the tooth fairy, in addition to taking your teeth, doesn't leave you a note on your bedside table saying, this is what you're intended to do for the rest of your life. It'd be
Yep.
much easier if that was the case. But of course, that's not how it works out. And sometimes, trial by error is a real thing in life. And we kind of keep trying and figuring out the things that may interest us or, may lead to a positive outcome. Not to saying that your teaching or your police work didn't work out, but you're honest with yourself and saying, this is maybe not what I was intended to do. And ultimately, you found yourself into spiritual writing, counseling, and podcasting, right?
That's right. No, no, as you said, I mean, we're all on somewhat of a scavenger hunt here, and U-turns are part of the game. So yeah, I think, and I've written about this in my books, that, it's really kind of like life is an exercise in trying different things on. And nobody goes shopping and finds the perfect fit the first time. That's what dressing rooms are for. So, you just have to keep at it until you find something that just feels right. And I encourage everyone to do that.
And how long have you been in the spiritual counseling and writing area?
Well, that's a kind of a multi-layered question. I mean, I've been writing, journaling, reading, researching since I was a teenager. So this has really been a lifelong endeavor. Approaching my mid 50s now, but as far as doing this full time, I've been at it. Gosh, I guess that's going on 10 years now, actually.
Okay, and obviously growing
Yeah.
up, being a child of the '80s, blogging, podcasting, those types of things, those weren't even fields of endeavors when you were coming up. Obviously, those are something that you gravitated towards as you continued to develop in this field. Your writing led you to those other areas where you can obviously express yourself in different mediums.
Correct. Yeah, that's right. It just kind of unfolds. You make one move, and then the next move seems a bit obvious, even though for maybe someone our age, or these things don't necessarily come naturally, but you learn them bit by bit, and they become less intimidating. Online things.
As a writer, do you find it easier to express your thoughts actually putting pen to paper, or do you prefer typing on a computer? Do you prefer, small notes and collecting them later? How do you assimilate your thoughts?
So, well, it's been an evolution. I mean, gosh, I mean, in my mid-teens, I started jotting things down on paper, thoughts, questions, things that inspired me, and I really kept a suitcase of these things for, gosh, 30 years. The same suitcase. I would just keep adding to it and journaled a lot, especially when I was in college, and those got added, but lots of sticky notes and scraps of paper. And so it wasn't until, about 10 years ago that I decided to actually digitize all that stuff. And that's really where the first book came from. I had to organize it, and I felt, well, alphabetically sounds pretty good. I'll just group all of my thoughts and musings and research into different words. And then, the first book kind of wrote itself just by that organization as a glossary.
Two questions. Are you describing a literal suitcase that you were putting these notes into?
Literal suitcase, yes.
Okay. Second question, what was the name of your first book?
First book is called Glossary of Life: A Path to Joy, Balance, and Peace.
And turning to your first book and kind of your thoughts that are encapsulated in there, just a bit of a softball question to forward the conversation. What is the purpose of human life?
Wow, of course, that's quite the question. I'll try to be brief on my perspective anyway. I feel that we're all here to grow, number one, and part of that growing is discovering who we are. And that sounds cliche, but each of us, I feel, are born with inner treasures that we have to work at a bit to uncover. And everybody's treasure is different. So the more we interact with people, the more we put ourselves out to maybe take a little risk every once in a while, or look at ourselves in the mirror, metaphorically, like, why did I do that? Why did I say that? Why am I feeling this? I mean, all of that, I think, just naturally, whether you're conscious of it or not, leads you to a better understanding of yourself. And with that understanding, you can, I think, better interpret what life is, what you want to make of it, and why you're here.
And touching on what you just said, you mentioned something about how we interact with people, or the level of human interactions, right? And today, with the advent of social media and all the things that go along with that, the actual tangible, tactile human interactions is probably on the decline, and more people are interacting and interfacing through the social media platforms. How do you see that as impacting the human experience positively, negatively through your work? And what do you see that, producing in ourselves?
Well, I feel it's a mixed bag. It really is. On one hand, you have incredible connectivity. Like, I interact with people online that I don't even know, that, will ask a question or share something in response to something I posted. And I've had quite in-depth chats with people through social media. And those have been, I feel, very beneficial, both for me and for them, really, because they point out things that I didn't see, or something that was worded a certain way. They'll read the wrong way. And and I'll end up thanking them. Wow, I'm gonna reword that. Thank you for pointing that out. But on the same token, I'm hopefully able to offer them a new perspective into whatever they're going through. So that part of it I do really like. The flip side, of course, is that there's a barrier now. There's like an insulating layer between you and who you're interacting with. So there's something that is lost when you're having to rely on intermediary of technology. It's just inherent. You don't quite get the sense of what they're saying. You're reading words, but you're not reading tone and you're not seeing facial expressions. So as a counselor, a spiritual counselor, it is a bit difficult sometimes when someone just wants to message. I prefer to hear their voice, of course. But I think overall, it's certainly a natural evolution. I mean, technology is not going to stop. So I feel it's kind of incumbent upon us, as writers, as counselors, as anyone really, to kind of, ride the tide of evolution while doing our best to stay grounded in our humanity and in our connections with others.
Okay, that's a great answer. And, I think about it and I want to get your perspective on this, especially with how young people, middle school age, high school kids, college kids communicate, mostly memes, GIFs, text message exchanges with pictures and things like that. And I analogize it to, we used to draw on cave walls, etch on cave walls. And then as human beings, we evolved through the Elizabethan Shakespearean age with the beautiful flowery language. And now we're, chiseling on digital cave walls. So we've
Right.
almost gone full circle and gone backwards in a way. Do you think that the way human beings communicate from a language perspective has been impacted in a positive or negative way through the social platforms within which we engage?
Well, that's a tough one. I guess grammatically, if the question is grammatical, I'd say it's a hard no. I think, yeah, and grammar, yeah, capitalization, all of it, yeah. But again, I do feel it's a bit of a mixed bag because if the choice is to interact perfectly or not interact at all, I like that people are more connected. I do feel that that is a positive thing. It needs to be, in my opinion, needs to be managed carefully, very carefully. But I think we'll get there. It's just one of those zigzag trends of up, down that hopefully will end up trending positive.
Yeah, and as a writer, as a podcaster, as a spiritual counselor, do you have concerns about the coming advent of AI and the possibility of the bleak dystopian future that is forecasted from time to time in
Yeah.
different areas of the news, the robots taking over and basically replacing the human beings as a productive group of people? Do you have fears of that coming dystopian future, or how do you view that?
I'm not sure that I'm concerned about the apocalypse, but I do have grave concerns over how easy AI has made it to take shortcuts, to cheat in a way. And cheat is can be a subjective term on this subject, but I just feel that look, I'm not an enemy of AI. I think it has incredible potential and incredible benefit, but there is a certain soullessness that I've detected when things are written with AI. It's to me, and I've been sent proposals, from AI bots, and I've heard speeches written by AI and read papers written by AI, and it's just this it's very, I don't know, it feels too glossy, too perfect. Like people have styles when they write and styles when they speech. I'm sorry, when styles when they talk in their speech, and that just gets kind of washed away with AI. It feels like AI, in my opinion, limits expression, limits self-expression because it doesn't allow the full communication, all the even the imperfections and the nuances and just the uniqueness of an individual's written word or spoken word to come through.
Right, and back to your point about how social media and how people communicate, grammar and spelling have taken a hit. Obviously, when you hear those speeches that maybe are produced through AI or with heavily assistance from AI, they just don't resonate as a true human interaction.
Correct. Yeah.
And do you think ultimately, and I know now there's AI producing music, there's AI producing theater, plays, and movies, and on the list continues. Do you think ultimately those types of produced media forms, which historically had been obviously performed and collaborated by actual human beings, do you think that's going to replace the human interaction, or you think it's just going to be a subset that people might gravitate towards? Like, for instance, right now, you may or may not like reggae music, but it's still out there, or country music, or whatever, just another genre, so
Mhm.
to speak.
Sure, sure. I think it's very novel right now. So, I mean, I've heard music that's been produced by AI that sounds quite good, by my estimation. But I feel that the real opportunity is to use AI as an assistant for ideas or inspirations. But if you let AI do all the work, just like, if you're writing or speaking or, whatever it is you're doing, you're going to lose part of yourself in the process, in my opinion. And I feel that, theater or music is the same way. There's a human touch there. And people, it's funny. Well, there's a kind of a pathology, I suppose you could call it, where some people can get obsessed with perfection. They're like, I just want to be better and better and better. And I'm not going to stop until I see myself or whatever I'm doing is perfect. And I think that's what makes AI so appealing, is that at least ostensibly, it appears that, boy, it's just perfect first time. It's right out of the box. It's perfect, glossy, packaged. Why would I want to improve this? But perfection in anything, human perfection, I think includes some things that are not perfect. It's like that's what makes a human expression perfect, whether it's writing or acting or singing or whatever it is. There are these little nuances that AI would miss because AI is so trying so hard to make it perfect and to make it flawless that there's a soul that's kind of lost in the process. Again, in my opinion.
No, that's great. And to pivot away from AI, because we could talk about the coming robot dystopian takeover for many hours, even though you said that you don't think the robots are coming. I'm on the fence. You know, I've seen a lot of science fiction movies that have alerted me to the fact that they are on the way, and we're just, whistling past the graveyard, so to speak. But as a writer and a spiritual counselor and just a deep thinker, where do you draw your inspiration from?
Well, gosh, much of my inspiration comes from the relationships in my life. My friends and family, even relationships with people I don't even know. I mean, I watch the news or I see a very well crafted movie or see an interview. Really, just being an observer of human behavior and our evolution, past and present, actually, I get a lot of inspiration from that. Now, what undergirds that is decades, really, and this is ongoing, of what I would call research, which, there are a lot of incredible books that have been written over millennia, books that are thousands of years old and modern day books and, teachers, philosophers, spiritual leaders who have all put together, I should say, over time, there's just an incredible body of resources that humanity has that I've tried to dive in and swim in my entire life. And that's really that effort and I'm not talking about locking myself away. I've done a little bit every day, but for decades, that kind of just curiosity about what humanity's answers are so far to life's biggest questions really inspires me to contemplate those things and come up with my own interpretations.
Right. And I guess your take on things, view has been crystallized through your travels to Asia historically, right? Can you tell me a little bit about how that maybe altered or broadened your thinking?
Certainly, certainly. Yes, I've been fortunate to do quite a bit of traveling over my life so far. Two of the most influential places I've been in the '80s, I went on actually a student science exchange program to China, and that really was an experience that grounded me. We went to some very small villages that some of which didn't even have electricity, and seeing how different people around the world live and how fortunate we have it here in the United States really was formative for me at a very early age. So that really informed my perspective. Later in life, when I was more on a kind of a spiritual pursuit, if you will, I went on a retreat in India, in Rishikesh, up in kind of northern India, and that was very formative as well to kind of take in that culture and walk where these legendary sages had walked and been to the places where they taught, and really just to kind of contemplate in silence, uh, the big questions.
Cool. What habit makes you successful as a writer? What do you lean on? What do you do on a daily basis that helps move things forward?
Well, as a writer, it's kind of a blessing and a curse. You set your own schedule, but there's no one over you telling you, okay, it's time to write. It's time to not be distracted by this thing you that just crossed your path. So staying disciplined and setting aside time is something that's very important. And I've tried to get up like I was at a job, like I was reporting for work, making my bed and tidying things up, and that could be more of a personality thing, and there are plenty of people who are very productive that have things everywhere, but for me, just doing what resonated. The environment that I write best in, so every morning when I would get up, I'd make sure I have that environment, and aside from that, really taking my time was is an important thing. As a writer or whatever project you happen to be working on, that can be a tendency to just want to get it done, to want to speed through it. But I learned early on that, especially with regarding to writing nonfiction, spirituality, philosophy, these are things that you don't necessarily have control over. So there's a certain degree of surrender to the process of like, hey, I just wrote this thing and it sounds good, but it's different when you write something down that you know is going to be read by others, that's going to be published. It's an entirely different level of due diligence. So that due diligence takes time because you really have to kind of let it soak in and say, gosh, is this how I really feel? Do I really think this is true? How can it not be true? Let me look for examples within or in the world around me that would challenge this. And that process takes time when you're writing about life, when you're writing about life in general.
Wow. Tell me a little bit about which writing setup makes you the best writer. What is that? What's the perfect situation where you would like to sit down and write? Tell me what that looks like.
For me, it's fairly simple. It's just kind of a cool, dark place. I'd like to kind of shut the world out so all the blinds are closed, the phones are off, and I've got it focused. I actually have a tank with bubbles in it that I kind of stare at that kind of gets the focus and the and kind of centers me, which is just a quirky thing, but it's what works for me. So
As a writer, do you often find yourself like, in thought somewhere else where you can't jot down that great idea? And do you take notes in your phone, or how do you capture those ideas before they slip away?
100%. Yeah, I've got a notes file in my phone that's just for that, and I'll sometimes take it out. I'll excuse myself and go to the restroom or something where I can just make a few quick notes if I'm in a social situation. But if something comes across, I've had the experience too many times where I'm like, "Oh, I need to remember to write that down," and then it just evaporates. So, yeah, absolutely.
And that's probably the worst feeling ever when you think you have a great idea and it was a great idea. It was the best idea you've ever had, and now you've lost it, and you hope it comes back, but sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it does.
Well, in the spirit of Eastern philosophy, which I'm a big fan of, when that has happened, it's a very good exercise in letting things go. It's like, look, this is not mine. This is something that came to me, and it's like a bird. It's like, all right, I just need to be still, and the bird's either going to come back and land on my shoulder, or it's not, and I just have to be okay with that.
What's the best advice you've ever received about writing or just thinking about spiritual counseling, what you do, something that assists you in your day-to-day work?
Gosh, that's probably going to be, writ large for life advice and writing advice, counseling advice. It's probably gonna be from Lao Tzu, who lived a couple thousand years ago. He wrote a book called the Tao Te Ching, which is a mind-bendingly distilled, spiritual philosophy book that's celebrated through the centuries. You can contemplate one page for days, actually. It's one of my favorite books, and he was a big proponent of effort, doing what you can with what you have, and then letting go of the result. That's been absolutely essential in my approach to life, in my approach to counseling, in my approach to writing, in my approach to being a friend or a family member. You're there as a participant, but you're not there to control. And that was one of the central tenets of his philosophy. And I just think it's applicable in so many ways in life. You certainly want to engage in life, engage in relationships, engage in making a difference in whatever way moves you. But if you're so focused on it turning out how you want it to be, a specific result, following your specific agenda, the metaphorical walls close on you very quickly. That exercise of surrender, of saying, you know what, it's really kind of faith in a way. It's saying, I've done my part and I'm giving the rest to grace, the universe, God, fill in the blank of whatever speaks to you. But I've come to perceive that there's a synchronicity in life. And when we are surrendered in that way, and it's a bit of a paradox, right? Because you're participating, yet you're also surrendered. You just fall into a synchronicity with relationships, with your endeavors, with everything in life, just kind of starts to resonate in a way that doesn't when you're, clenched and worried and, gosh, if this doesn't happen, it'll be a disaster, that kind of mindset. So I think that philosophy, that's again thousands of years old, is probably the best, among the best advice I've ever had.
Do you ever stop and ponder, um, just that something written 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, however long that was written, it c the just the insanity of the fact that that can still impact, and shape your thought process today. Do you ever actually sit and think about that? Like, you know, it's almost, inconceivable that something written so long ago still resonates and has, so much, impact today.
Mhm. Mhm. Certainly. Yeah, I just feel that truth, and again, we're all in the process of finding our own truth, our personal truth, greater truth, scientific truths. But there are certain things that you come across, certain ways of thinking, certain philosophies, certain concepts that are core. And they aren't core because a prophet said them 2,000 years ago, and they're not core because they're written in some book, however good the book may be. I think that they're core and they're pretty much immutable because they just work, I mean, truth and, harmony in life, I think just boils down to what works, what actually is functional, what's sustainable, what leads you to joy versus leads you to being out of resonance in life, and so it's a simple formula, but executing it in one's life can be a complicated process, but I think if you try to boil it down and keep the core of whatever you know so far central to whatever you're doing, it makes life easier. It makes life simpler. It kind of cuts through the chatter of the mind. And you remind yourself things like, oh, wait a minute, this is kind of all about love. I mean, am I making a choice from love or from non love? Am I making a choice out of fear or am I doing something that inspires me, that I don't feel captured by or controlled by, however difficult that may be? So those bigger concepts can inform and guide even the smallest decisions.
Awesome. As a spiritual counselor, what is the most difficult factual scenario, something that you encounter in your work? Like, what's the most difficult thing that you've encountered, and how do you assist your clients in that?
Well, typically, when someone contacts me, they're in crisis. And having to, well, I should say, assisting them in downshifting away from that crisis mentality is really the first and most vital step. Like, there has to be a grounding point. They're being, electrocuted, if you will, by the lightning in their life. And to show them that many times, more often than not, they're the ones holding the lightning rod is a difficult path sometimes because some people, have a difficult time looking at themselves and understanding that a lot of these difficulties that they're encountering are coming from within them. They're just being manifested in their experience. It's a mindset that they have that's manifesting a certain way. It's a way that they're behaving or treating other people or talking that's being reflected back to them. So invariably, there's a process of saying, okay, let's pause this and let's try to shift out of victim mentality and into self-reflective mode. So making that shift is really, it's kind of like the speed bump to get over before you can really get down the road of affecting change is really holding up that mirror. And that has to be done very carefully and very compassionately because some people, most people, I should say, aren't ready to see that all at once. So sometimes it takes some dosing, if you will.
Yeah, sometimes, self-reflecting and actually zeroing in on the fact that you yourself might be the actual source of the problem is sometimes hard for people to recognize and come to terms with.
Correct. Yeah. And by the way, I make it clear to people before they even start with me that I am a spiritual counselor. So, this is not counseling that you would typically receive in an office. I'm always going to come back to a perspective that is, it's not clinical. So there's always going to be that element of it. And I've tried to make that clear.
What, keeps you up at night, and what keeps you coming back for more in the field that you're in?
Gosh, let's see, 2 good questions. I don't suppose there's a whole lot that keeps me up at night. I mean, you mean like more of could you be more specific with the question? Yeah. What do you mean?
I mean, most jobs come with that
Mm,
one thing or 2 things or 5 things that kinda like, may wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning thinking about whatever it is
yeah,
that you do. Is there anything in your field
of
as a
course.
spiritual counselor, writer, podcaster, let's not limit it to spiritual counseling,
Yeah.
that keeps you up at night or also, keeps you coming back for more? It doesn't necessarily have to be a
Uh-huh.
negative thing that wakes you up at 2 o'clock in the morning. Maybe you're thinking out about a particular client and you have that, that aha moment of like, "Oh, man," like maybe what they told you in a session, and now it has time to distill in your mind and kinda how the subconscious works, and then all of a sudden, you get to that point, and I don't know if that's the answer, but
Yeah.
a little bit
Yeah,
more
yeah.
information.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Thanks for clarifying. Yeah. I would say that, given the nature of what I do and the perspective I offer, I really do try to practice what I preach, if you will. And getting back to Lao Tzu, it's like, I offer everything that I can in a way that I feel it can be heard. And I recognize that people are on their own path. Sometimes maybe they'll hear it. Sometimes maybe what I have to say is not what they need to hear. So there is a default disposition, I suppose, of accepting of like they're going to be where they need to be. And I start every single session with that in my head. It's like, I don't know if I'm supposed to be of benefit to this person today or not. I don't know if what I have to say to them is going to resonate or not. But the important thing is that I'm here for them if they feel like they can engage or they want to. So the effects or the results, as Lao Tzu would say, don't really keep me up. But what does keep me coming back is that connection. And I have to say, well, where our conversations go, with my clients and even, friends and family too, not just clients, but sometimes as they're speaking and telling me the crisis that they're going through, I will actually have the thought, I have no idea what to tell them. I'm like, I'll actually have the thought. And then what happens is, just to kind of walk you through, invariably what has happened to me is that I'll have that thought of, "No, I don't have anything to add or offer." And then as soon as I surrender that, as soon as I say, I'm sitting here doing the best I can, maybe I'm just going to be on the phone as an ear. It's like these insights. Like it's like the words kind of just start coming, and I don't know. I temporarily tap into, and it just kind of flows through. I just start talking, and we start exchanging more ideas, and the conversation goes places that I never suspected it would. And I'm offering things that I never thought I could. So that's the part, that kind of being in the flow, or, as some athletes call it, the zone. That is really one of the most amazing feelings, is when I feel like I'm being used as a tool, for this person, and I'm not really guiding the process. Like that is really what keeps me coming back, I guess, to answer your question.
Sure. And is there any particular aspect of spiritual counseling that is misunderstood? And if so, how would you clarify that misunderstanding?
Wow, that's a multi-layered question. Spiritual counseling is such a big, broad, general term, and it doesn't have any governing body. So there's so many different flavors, and it's like whatever metaphorical bay you pull into, you kind of ahead of time sign up for what you're going to get. Like if you're a Catholic, and you want to talk to a priest, of course they can be of wonderful benefit to you within the context and confines of Catholicism. If that's your faith, where you feel comfortable, what resonates with you, yeah, that's good. The same thing, in other religious traditions. What I do is not religious based. It's very spiritually based. So I don't have kind of an arena really that's identifiable. And, as far as what's misunderstood, I feel that there are just some counselors out there, whether they're rabbis or priests or, anybody in an organized religion, that sometimes put party line, if you will, over, specific needs. So there are instances that I've been aware of, and I've even been party to them, where a certain belief or a tenet or a doctrine or some sort of dogma can actually be a bit damaging, if it's based in fear or based in exclusion or, it has some sort of a negative source. So I don't know if that directly answers your question, but I just feel that there is a lot of spiritual counseling out there that can be threatening or kind of invokes fear in a lot of people. So I'd hope that as many people as possible can steer clear of that kind of counseling.
That's great. If you could tell the you of yesterday something that the you of today knows, what would that be?
Well, with me specifically, it would be to relax a little more. Honestly, I think I have a number of friends that might agree, especially those who've known me a long time. That I could be a bit high strung at times, and it's really manifested in some ways in my kind of dogged pursuit of the perfect career or the perfect set of circumstances or, gosh, even the perfect partner. I mean, you name it. And over the years, I've mellowed, I think, a bit. And so I would tell myself, metaphorically, a little more sail and a little less steam, I think. So that's what I would tell my younger self.
What defines success for you?
Getting back to the connections I make, whether it's online or in person or counseling someone, it's that connection that I really thrive on. But again, practice what I preach and the tenets that I love so much from that are millennia old. My success, I work hard so that it isn't dependent on external metrics. I feel that if I can offer what I have to offer, whether it has an impact or not, if I'm offering it the best way I know how, I feel that that's success. When I'm able to navigate the rapids of life, if you will, because we all have our own rapids, and come through them, in a way that inspires me. Sometimes, as we all understand, life can overwhelm us sometimes, But, getting back to another maritime metaphor, sailboats have really deep keels, and when they're tipped over on one side, it's that really heavy, deep keel that kind of rights them, kind of rights the ship. So that process of being able to right myself and help others right themselves is really what success feels like to me, I suppose.
It's a great answer. All right, now we're going to move on to what I call the speed round questions, which are just some short questions, basically yes or no. The questions are self-explanatory. If you need explanation, I'll be happy to share with you, but I think you'll figure it out. You're a smart guy. And if you'd like to add more than a yes or no, please expound on the answer. All right, dogs or cats?
Wow. Okay, that's like trying to choose between yin and yang. I'd have to say, I love them both, but I'd probably lean a little more toward cats.
Well,
I love how peaceful and tranquil they are. I resonate with that.
that's a great answer. A lot of people, it's not a trick question or a trap question. And I grew up with all sorts of pets, dogs and cats, and
Mhm.
I love dogs, but cats are that little bit of an enigma about them where you almost have to earn their respect and love. They just don't give it
Yes.
away. Like dogs are, just happy to see you no matter what. A cat is just kind of ambivalent about you being home sometimes.
Funny enough, Will, I have a chapter in my first book about cats and dogs. So, yeah, and trying to get your arms around the different types of love that each of them offer. And the case I make is that one love is not greater than another. They're just different. So, yeah,
They're vastly different. That's for that's for
yeah.
sure. The moon landing, yes or no?
Absolutely, yes. I was fortunate to have an internship I live in Orlando, so Kennedy Space Center is kind of down the road. And being a science file, I was fortunate to have an internship there. So, yeah, I've been exposed to enough of the space program to say absolutely, yes, we landed on the moon.
Okay, Coke or Pepsi?
Is kombucha an answer? Maybe?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not much of a soda drinker, so I default to coconut water or
I
kombucha.
actually drank a kombucha about 2 hours ago. It's
Yeah.
delicious. Aliens, yes or no?
Yeah, it's such a big place that we live in, the universe, that I think it's inevitable that they're out there somewhere.
Did you glean any insights into the aliens when you were, doing your internship at NASA? Did they, pull back the curtain and show you where they were?
I mean, nothing I can talk
Okay,
about,
of
Will.
course. If you could fly, time travel, or be invisible, which one would you pick and why?
Definitely invisible. As someone who kind of has their livelihood on observation, self-observation, observing others, observing the world around them, I would just being invisible, I think would be the most interesting and useful to me anyway.
Okay. What's your favorite food?
I'm a big Thai fan, Thai food fan.
All right.
Yeah.
What's your favorite sport or hobby?
Gosh, I love riding my bike. So I would say bike riding is what I enjoy physically the most. And, I've always kind of held that my friends are my hobby. I mean, I'm like so blessed to have so many great friends, and I spend as much time as possible with them. So they're kind of my hobby and family, of course. But yes,
Does ketchup belong on a hot dog?
back in my hot dog eating days, I absolutely had ketchup on every hot dog I ever had. Yeah.
All right. What is your favorite book, movie, song, or sequel? And I'll put a caveat on this one. If your book was made into a movie and then that movie
Mhm.
also became a sequel, you can select one
Okay.
to cover all three.
Okay. All right. So book, fiction or nonfiction or both?
Whatever you like. Your
Okay,
favorite.
alright. Gosh, I read a book not too long ago that was just, absolute candy for someone who grew up in the '80s. It's Ernest Cline's, Ready Player One. Just loved it. It was so much fun. So many memories from the '80s packed into that book, and it was a fun story. So, nonfiction, I would say Conversations with God, by Neil Donald Walsh. That's really the book that kind of jump-started my spiritual, sojourn, if you will. I really enjoyed that book, and the subsequent books that he wrote. So let's see, what's next? Book,
Movie.
movie. I would say, Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, the first movie in that, series is probably my favorite. Yeah, that's, the fantasy genre.
Song.
Song? Gosh, there is one song that just absolutely instantly causes me to relax, and that would be Elton John's, Nikita.
All right. And what about
Yeah,
sequel?
that's easy. The Empire Strikes Back.
Oh,
Yeah.
I know they made Ready Player One into a movie, but I don't know that it was received as well as the book was.
It wasn't received as well. You can't you would need 4 movies to put that book into a proper movie, but I thought they did a pretty good job, when in the 2 hours they had.
Well, Manny, I really appreciate you being with us today on PodNumbra. Just a couple more questions. Where can someone find more information about you and your writings and what you do?
Yeah, the central hub is really authormannygarcia.com. There's a link to my podcast and social media there. There's some book samples, and of course the blogs are there, and some other information. So yeah, that's kind of the central. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, author Manny Garcia. So that's another avenue as well.
All right. And if you were to recommend one person I should interview next, who would that be?
Well, there is a doctor in the Tampa area by the name of George Campagnoni, who is a very learned intellectual and a deeply spiritual man. I think he would be not only an engaging guest, but a very entertaining one. I suggest you interview him
I
next.
happen to know George, and I would have to set aside several hours to capture that conversation. Much like Ready Player One, the movie, it'll be multi parts.
There you go. Perfect.
All right, well, Manny, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for spending the time with us today. Take care.
It's been a privilege. Well, thank you.